everyone. Welcome to the Raising Excellence podcast. Agnieszka, you need to give me a stronger cue there. This is one of the most valuable hours of your day. At least that's what I expect here out of all the panelists today. I am Tyler Bloyer, and I am from tylerbloyer.com. I'm filling in for Mike, who's normally the host for the show, who kind of gets things kicked off. He's down there in Anarchapulco doing his thing this week with the AEX experience. So he's probably having a great old time with that. This week, we're taking a break from Tim Flynn's presentation, but we're honoring Valentine's Day by discussing communication issues within relationships. And the title of today's show is The Common Thread That Leads You Out of Darkness. And I myself am curious to see how this is going to go. Let's do a quick roundtable with the hosts that we have here today with us, starting with Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator.
Hi, everybody. I just have to fix something on the podcast, so go to somebody else, and but nice to be here.
No problem. She's also our technical in-house guru, so these shows just don't happen. She's manning the controls over there. We have with us Willow, the trauma consultant.
Hi, everyone.
And also, who wasn't here yesterday, but is a frequent host on the show, is Dennis, the freedom facilitator.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here with you today. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Deirdre, of course, the developmental strategist.
Hi. Glad to hear.
All right. Now, if we were watching yesterday's show, we got into talking about the fallacy of the week, and I was curious about what that was. So the fallacy of the week this week is a straw man argument or a straw man fallacy, and Willow is going to kick us off by describing a little bit more about what that is and actually reading a definition, I think is what she was going to do.
Yeah, so I pulled up a quick Wikipedia. I believe it's Wikipedia, but it says straw man occurs when someone argues that a person holds a view that is actually not what the other person believes. So instead of attacking the person's actual statement or beliefs, it is the distorted version that is under attack.
Yeah, and it can also show up by exaggerating somebody's flaws, undermining their position, essentially gaslighting, right? We have an image for the fallacy of the week this week. Let me see if I can show you. There you guys
Well, you're
go.
basically creating and representing an impression of someone that is not true.
Right. And that's what the image refers to. Now, how often do we see that kind of behavior in relationships where the people are not so interested in communicating, but they start undermining each other and using fallacies to communicate as opposed to open communication?
In relationships, I just realized it's that moment when lost train of thought. Come back to me later.
I just taken off the fallacy of the week from the screen, but we'll come back to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The way that I read it was painting somebody with a brush, with like painting them the way that I want them to be seen so that I win the argument. You say, I'm just going to paint you as this type of something, and that, therefore that's who you are. So why should I take what you have as credibility?
Yeah, like, oh, you think too much. Sit down and take a rest. You don't need to think so much every day. Oh, yeah. It's just, or like that thing you said earlier, DG, about the dress last year's season.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? You're wearing that dress to this party? Oh, okay. That's last season's dress. It's okay. You'll be okay. Everyone, there's people that like retro, I guess. That's kind of undermining them. So why should they want to take part in a party or a gathering?
And it also ensures that the person will be self-conscious about their dress the whole party.
At least for women.
And it shifts the focus away from you, right? And it will make it so much more easier to kind of work on your own turf, because you determine the grounds basically where the argument is going to take place.
I was saying before the show started that basically if you've ever watched the interview with, I can't remember who is interviewing Jordan Peterson or what TV show it's on, or news
Something
show.
in England, I think.
Yeah, okay. Or yeah, Canada. And she keeps saying, "So what you're saying is," it became a viral meme for a while. And she would rephrase whatever he was saying to mean not at all what he was saying. She would not literally get the nuance of what he was saying.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
almost
that's
like
a
she
good
had a
example.
preconceived notion of what she expected, and she was trying to fit everything he was saying into her framework, her understanding of what she thought of him. It's
So in
very
other words,
interesting.
Yeah.
like one of the dangers of not being aware of this is that you can be easily put in a box that you're actually not in, or you can be portrayed as somebody, or you can be made to look like somebody that you're actually not. And if you're not really aware of what this means, then especially if you're like in media, if you're with a big group of people, then they might be starting looking at you from a whole different angle, or as somebody that you're actually not, because somebody is basically framing you with that tool.
Yeah.
So I was curious. It kind of sounds to me like in relationships, when you get to that point where you're really frustrated and you start thinking in black and white, and you're like, they never vacuum the carpet, or they always leave their dishes out, not in the sink. Isn't that kind of straw manning? It's kind of like misinterpreting what's actually going on and creating a bigger deal, or was that a different one?
I think that's a different one, because it's not like you're actually talking to the person. I guess it would be if
I think
if
Tyler
you're in
is
front of
the
them talking to them.
Tyler is the fallacy expert. Which one? Which
maybe.
fallacy is it?
Well, that's somewhat of a straw man because you're kind of taking them in that one little window and then saying, well, they're going to always be this way. And you're not really giving them much time to maybe they're going to change that behavior. Maybe the time that you're witnessing them is not how they've always been. And like when meeting somebody, maybe they show you a certain behavior that's negative. That doesn't mean that they're always that way. Maybe you need to give them a little bit more time. So I do see that as a straw man. If you're portraying someone as being this way all the time, that would be unfair, for someone to do to me. I'm constantly changing. So yeah, that I see that as somewhat of a gaslighting and a straw man fallacy a little bit.
Eric always says whenever I criticize something he does, he looks at me and goes, "Believe in me until I succeed." And I think that's a good reminder, because that's really what relationships are all about, right? Like if you start undermining the other person, you're not doing any favors to your relationship anymore.
Yeah.
And that brings to my mind that the path is not, which is the theme for today, right? Is what's the common thread out of darkness, and not only out of darkness, but also into where? Ideally into the light, right?
Well, what they say, that love is not two people looking at each other, but love is two people looking in the same direction. So if you find that common thread and start walking along it, you'll be facing the same direction.
Hopefully a direction into a bright light.
When you mentioned this yesterday, I wanted to bring up this story. I wrote that pretty much exactly into my wedding vows, which was way too long because I had too much to say and I had a captive audience. So I was like, you're gonna listen to me for a little bit, or at least what I had to say. But I made it a point. I never liked how people were like, oh, we're two lives and now we're one. I'm like, no, we're still two people. I want to do what I want to do, and he wants to do what he wants to do. And sometimes that is what we want to do, separate. We go to parties and people are like, don't you want to sit next to your spouse? I'm like, no, I'm around him all day. I came here to be with you, not him.
Yeah.
And I made sure to write in the vows, I was like, we are living two lives side by side and walking in the same direction, almost verbatim. I was like, we are not just all of a sudden one person. I don't know. It meant a lot to me.
Right. It's like you're saying with the dishes in the sink or whatever, like, is that correct to have that expectation if that's not their habitual behavior, to always have a clean sink or whatever? And you could spend a lot of time being really frustrated about that. Or you could, if that's how you like to do it, you do it that way. Perhaps some of your behavior will rub off on that person over time. Perhaps it won't. And maybe you shouldn't be trying to control their behavior, and just, if you've decided to be with that person, then kind of let it go in a way. I mean, it's nice to have a clean house and you can kind of do that yourself. But if they're not exactly like you in that way, that's a bit of a straw man too, to say, well, I thought you were going to be this way and you're not, and you're that way, even though when you met them, they've been that way the whole time. So
It's
Yeah.
a big
That's
lesson, really,
that's a
to
good
accept
point.
the other one for who he or she is, right? And to to be able to accept other people for who they are, and to accept that you don't have the power to really change them, but they will only change if they want to, and you can encourage them or show them a different way. But the easier part, if you want to change things, is always to change yourself. And if you don't want to change your behavior, you might change your perspective towards them.
Yeah, but the truth is that housework is sometimes or usually dreaded, but there are ways to organize housework that fit the lifestyle of both people, right? Like, often in relationships, I'll be heard saying, "Oh, you haven't done the dishes. Does that mean you want to trade for the bathroom?" And then usually my partner will go, "No, no, I'll do the dishes." You know what I mean? Because it's like, okay, well, you're obviously going to pull your weight, so which piece do you want to take on? Because there are all these pieces, you need to pick up a few, and then I'll pick up a few, and it doesn't have to be the same thing. I personally don't like other people doing my laundry, so that's not even an option. And in my last relationship, I wasn't allowed to touch the bathroom.
I thought I resolved all those problems just by getting married.
But you mean like now you do all the housework? You are the house husband, so essentially that would be your job.
Shouted us.
What does that mean, house husband?
His wife goes
He's a
to work,
homemaker.
makes the big money
He's
with
a
the big
homemaker.
yeah,
That's a real
a
job.
homemaker.
A job. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that
he's
means
a
all the
house husband.
housework
What does
is
that even mean?
his. The same thing.
One needs to cook, one needs to eat.
Well,
and,
after-
stuff like that we share.
If you can have a housewife, you can also have a house husband, right?
Yeah.
Homemaker,
Sounds fair.
housewife, house husband, same
I
thing.
say homemaker because then it's a job title. Whereas a housewife or a house husband, that's not actually a job title. That's like, I feel like it kind of downgrades the idea of being a homemaker.
That's a good
Because I've
thought.
still got to budget, I've still got to organize, I've still got to do up spreadsheets and
Yeah, it's a
timings
straw
and
man.
schedules.
that's just a big
Yeah.
straw man fallacy.
Yep, maybe. So when
same-
does straw man become gaslighting? Because
When you know that you are lying and you're trying to convince someone else that they are wrong.
yeah, and they buy into it. The minute it becomes gaslighting, as soon as the victim buys into it.
Right. Like in an argument, you could start to kind of straw man someone and gaslight them in the heat of the moment. You're kind of just throwing accusations out there that they can't defend right there on the spot. And then that's also a form of gaslighting, right? You're crazy. You're kind of crazy, and you're not understanding what I'm saying, or you're not listening. All that is making them feel, oh, what's wrong? Why can't I listen? Why is he saying? And if they believe it, like you said, then that's even more of kind of like almost just manipulation of the other person's emotions.
Well, yeah, because if you
That's
weaken
what it's
them
for.
to a certain level and the person is no longer able to defend themselves very well, then that means that you can manipulate them easier. You can get them to do what you want.
Because they're getting emotional.
Well, gaslighting, for some reason, I see it as it's almost like two steps and two fallacies. So the gaslighting part would be, it originally came from husbands who would try to make their wives feel crazy by turning down the gas lights and then claiming that no, they never turned it down. And then they'd start claiming that the wives turned it down.
There
and
was
then
a
being
play,
like, "Nope."
yeah.
So then the next time they question the husband on something, and this goes both ways. Women gaslight just as frequently as men do. It's not a gender thing. After they've broken that down, then they use the straw man of, remember when you thought I was turning the gaslight down? You're always doing this. You're always kind of crazy. Don't you know this? Haven't you picked it up?
You mean you haven't noticed?
Like we all notice when we feel crazy. We just don't show it.
I had a
in the
roommate who
eyes.
did gaslighting with like, and it was when I was with Eric in Calgary. And she went all the way to taking Eric to the other room and saying, we should really get her to a psychologist because there's really something seriously wrong with her. and it's up to us to protect Agnieszka from herself. And she would also go into the kitchen and move everything around. Like she would put the peeler in the wrong drawer. And so whenever I tried to do anything in the kitchen, I could never find anything. And I was like, well, where's this? And where's that? It has to be somewhere.
You could have stopped somebody with that peeler.
I didn't know until years later what gaslighting was. When I was living with my biological father, and he also has narcolepsy, and I do too. So we both have bad memory issues. This very well could be remembered wrong, and it could be both of us not understanding what was going on at the time. But it really seemed like there would be moments where he would set my lunch out, and then he'd call me to come eat lunch because he made all my food. And I was really, really under strict rules in his house. And one day he set my lunch out and he didn't say anything. And so my lunch sat there for 2 or 3 hours. And I never went out there because I was like, this isn't what was supposed to happen. I'm supposed to be called for lunch and that's what I need to do. So I just kind of freaked out and froze. And I got in trouble because I didn't go out to eat lunch. And then I got talked to about how he never calls me to eat lunch. That I was like, have I been hearing your voice for the last 6 months to a year, calling me to lunch every day? Because that's what I remember. So unless you're telling me the last 6 months of my memory, it is screwed with my head for years, where I was just like, I don't understand what happened. And when I found out I had narcolepsy, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's what happened. And then I found out about gaslighting, and I was like, this kind of fits a little bit more. But yeah, it was fascinating. It's insane what you don't notice is going on until you have a word for it. And then you're like, oh, I see that. That's everywhere.
But I also find that people say things like, like just like talking without thinking. And then if you stop and go, did you just say da 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 da? They'll say, no, I never said that. But they did. And, for those moments you wish you had a recorder, right?
Yeah. And I think that is trying to gaslight, but it's not in a malicious way. It's more of a self-preservation. Not that it's any healthier, but I think there is a difference, and we need to notice a difference between I'm kind of ignorant or nescient, and I'm actually trying to inflict harm on other people.
Yeah, but there is a difference because sometimes people just get wrapped up in their mind. Like when, my mom, for example, when she gets like hormonal with her thyroid issues, right? And she goes, you never call me. You haven't called me for, like, this was years ago, right? You haven't called me for so long. And I just called her the last couple days and she was too busy. But she remembers maybe thinking 2 weeks before that and feeling hurt about it. And she kind of goes with that emotion when she feels the emotion, but she doesn't analyze the fact that it's not really appropriate to the situation. Like she kind of goes with it. And then the next day she said she never said it.
I think when you're communicating with somebody like in a genuine way, it would be a mistake to just say, you're gaslighting me. And then stand as if you've just won something. Like, it is okay, like Willow said, to identify what's happening. And it might even be okay to vocalize that. Hey, I feel like you're just misrepresenting me here. You might even not want to use the fallacy, because it becomes a game of like, oh, I just played my fallacy card. Now you got nowhere to go. Like, argument's over. Because the truth is, like, somebody can use a fallacious argument, but still be 100% correct. There's, you can be using a fallacy, and then like I can straw man somebody and say that guy's just an asshole, and then explain the behavior that led me to come to that conclusion. And so I straw man him at first,
but nobody's just an asshole. So that's why I tried to say he was being an asshole at that point, because I'm sure you've been being an asshole at some point. I have.
Yeah. That's true. And you wouldn't want to just put them in that box. But also, like, in that communication of just throwing, oh, well, you're using a fallacy, so this conversation's over. I think it'd be good to be careful about that, too, and just, vocalize it, bring it out on the table, and then continue walking it out further,
Wouldn't that make any hyperbolic statement a straw man fallacy?
Can you explain what you mean a little bit more by that?
Like if you exaggerate something, I guess I can't explain.
I think that
Yeah,
I did see that when I brought up straw man up on images. That was one of the images that came up. I think it was a meme, and it said straw man fallacies just everywhere. Because it could be. For me, it's that I'm going to just hurt you. I'm just going to hurt you, and I'm going to get enjoyment out of hurting you, because how dare you, whatever, like approach me, argue with me. It's that next kind of levelness to it, instead of, oh well, that guy's just an arsehole. Like, what an arsehole! I can't believe he just like elbowed that person and just kept walking. That's yeah. At that time he was an asshole. Who knows why?
he was
But
being an asshole.
Being an asshole.
Yeah.
But to take it to
Yeah,
that
that's
next
like
level
more
where,
of a ad hominem. Is I think ad hominem, you can do an ad hominem attack against the person, right? An ad hominem attack is like you don't address their arguments, but you throw an ad hominem, which is an attack against the person. So you know what? You're being an asshole right now. Now let me explain why. So if you don't give the explain why part, then you just throw in an ad hominem argument. That's not, helpful. So yeah, ad hominems are more, where you could still use it and then continue on and explain why you've just attacked them. But if you purely just attack them and then don't backfill that, then that's a fallacious argument that has no real grounding in it.
Yeah, I just pulled up ad hominem versus straw man. Ad hominem is directed against a person rather than the position they are maintaining. So, yeah, saying like the catty comments between girls, that would be more of an ad hominem because it's attacking their character and not actually what they're saying. A straw man fallacy would be kind of attacking what they're saying, but not actually attacking what they're intending to say. It's like I lost my train of thought. I keep thinking of it.
the way that I thought of an ad hominem was if I just attacked you and your character.
Like, you are an asshole. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Whereas the straw man's more about like the misrepresentation that you mentioned with the Jordan Peterson scenario. Like, I'm saying this, and then you turn around and go, "Are you serious? It's that? Oh, please." It's it's the belittling, and this is where I was at. Like, it's like it kind of gets to that. It could be that, but then it's like when it steps up and gets really malicious, and it's like, no, I'm just gonna hurt you, and I'm just gonna take enjoyment out of just hurting you. That's when that to me is gaslighting. I can see you trying to work this out with me. I can see that you're trying to have a conversation with me, but I'm just going to say whatever it is to see you cry.
See,
when I
see that kind of thing in somebody's eyes, that enjoyment, that hurting me, I just nope, right out of there. Like, that's just like, doesn't matter if it's a friend or, even a coworker. I've quit jobs over stuff like, I don't need that kind of shit in my life.
I can see that, and I was gonna go there because if you're talking about communication, and you were mentioning in the second last show, communication, coming together, common union. If the basis or the foundation of the communication is to transfer some kind of information, but also to find common ground that that builds a foundation to move forward to a different idea, to a different place, together, to looking in the same direction as a couple, or then even in a larger context, as a society, as a community, to find common ground, to find a foundation of communicating, of coming together, of more than one. Then at a certain point, like, I would dare to say, it doesn't even matter what kind of fallacy we're talking about, but if it becomes destructive in a way, then and at least one of the two partners of the communication are not really looking into advancing into on a constructive ground that brings forward both parties, then it doesn't even matter what kind of fallacy it really is, but then it's really just to identify if it really makes sense to try to continue to communicate on those grounds. And I think that's really also like for fallacies, for me, it's interesting to differentiate and to spot them and to become versed in them. But it's also important to use that in a constructive way, just as Tyler was saying earlier, not to play them as cards and say, ha ha, 1 point for me, 1 point for you, whatever. But really, maybe to use them to help each other to advance in the communication, in the relationship, to advance, like we said, out of darkness into a brighter place.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Dennis. But both people, if it's just two people having a conversation, need to be wanting to make that connection. If one person's
Definitely.
only wanting to make that connection and kind of being open and giving, and the other person's just not, then it's not going to work. I'll just
But
keep
then,
kind of.
yeah, I'd agree. And oftentimes there's also the differences in communication. Like there's the verbal communication, there's non-verbal communication, there's communication beyond even words and gestures. So sometimes, one of the partners might not even be ready or able. In my work with children and youths, is like, it took me a while to realize like how, rhetorically, like I might have been able to express myself and to have words for certain things, and the children, for example, they wouldn't have any words. They couldn't even say what they felt. So if you're not even being given the ability to name things or to identify, let's say, like feelings or emotions that you have, or emotions that you feel in that moment, then verbally you cannot express it. And then you might have to be creative in order to give them venues, whether it's like drawing or singing or instruments or whatever it is, to express those emotions. So sometimes in a relationship it might be the same thing, that one of the partners might be very rhetorically versed and or even accustomed to, by his upbringing and his culture, to like speak out his or her feelings, while the other partner might be from a completely different cultural background, where, for example, it was never fostered or never allowed, for a younger one or female, or whatever the context might be, to even like look up or speak up or voice your own feelings, or might not even have been encouraged to actually go within and actually inquire what he or she is feeling. So they're like, vast differences sometimes that, just by the looks you couldn't even tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at like Jordan Peterson, since we brought him up earlier, it's okay to bring him up again. Um, one of the things he would say quite often, because I listened to quite a bit of his work just to kind of get through it, and it was, how important is it for you to be right in that kind of moment in the argument? Like, do you really want to win an argument against your spouse? Well, what is that really
Yeah.
going to get you in the end if you conquer that argument and you've proved all the fallacies? And I mean, they may not even understand the fallacies, if and you're throwing them out there at them. That's really, logic can only go so far when you're talking about someone that you really care about, and you've already determined that their character is something that you really value, and their different values are things that you value. And there's something, and they're kind of doing something, they're having an argument, and they're having an off day. How important is it for you to conquer that moment and win that argument? I mean, the logic can only get us so far, especially when it starts to get into emotions. People do things that aren't necessarily logical when they're emotional. And so
Yeah.
to just strictly frame everything around a logic, and use fallacy and point out fallacies is, I think, a mistake. It's not really listening. It's just listening for where someone's wrong and then jumping on top of that. But Agnieszka, the common thread that leads you out of darkness, can you lead us out of this
Darkness.
fallacy roundtable?
Let's show the
And explain.
fallacy one more time, just in
Okay.
case somebody didn't see it. Okay. So it's all about misrepresentation. But the thing is, if in your relationship you cultivate basically we teach people how to treat us, right? We train people how to treat us. And if we're not in agreement to be treated in a certain way, it'll be harder for people to treat us that way. I'm not saying it's impossible, but just gonna put us back in here. Yeah, I think that that striving to continually work together, like say my partner doesn't want to do dishes ever, what are the things we can do about it? How can I feel okay about always doing the dishes? Like, can we have a monetary exchange? Like, say, well, I'll pay you a couple $100 a month and you'll just do all my housework, or 300 or whatever. It doesn't have to be like hour for hour. It just has to be something that makes you feel better about the situation. Or if you have, sorry, go
I
ahead.
heard of women, I was just agreeing with you. I heard of women that rang up all of the cleaners in the area, and then they negotiated costs for her doing what a cleaner would, and she wrote down a list and had all the requirements there, and yeah, that works for them.
Yeah, but see, the way I look at it is 50% of the housework is my responsibility, right? And also, I'm a woman, so I like to make the house look pretty and, you know, make all this stuff. So maybe even 65% is my responsibility, right? So that leaves his 35%. If he really doesn't want to do it, then what can we do about it? How can we work around it, right? Mm-hmm. Are you always going to clean my car then and fill it with gas? Because if I never have to get gas, that may be worth for me to do the inside and, you know, and take care of the, you know, there are all these ways of negotiating, right? And the way I look at it, I'm not negotiating for all the housework. I'm just negotiating for that 34% that doesn't really belong to me.
I like it.
Because a guy would never put as much effort and care. Well, some guys would, but most guys wouldn't really. It
depends.
Right?
Like the housework situation, they did like a study on it. It depends. It's really dependent on your level of comfortableness to the state of the house. So if you're a person where your level of comfortable is, oh, it's okay, I'll get to it later, I really need to focus on this first, and a later person, then it's going to make the person who needs it clean and organized, and then they move on to the next task. It's going to be more difficult that way. So it's like, to me, that's really a personal thing. So if it's more important to you to have a more organized and tidy house, then that's your thing.
Yeah. But I also think that if a guy is helping you for your, or paying you for your share of the housework, then he can really say he's helping you with the housework when he's doing housework. Because until that moment, he's just doing his own damn housework. He's not helping anybody. He's helping himself, right?
For me, I think it's interesting that like cleanly people tend to get with messy people. For some reason, they like attract each other, right?
Balance it out.
And I'm more of the like tidy. I'm not like cleaning with the walls with bleach every other month or something, but I'm tidy. I like to have things picked up, and there's a reason for that. It's not necessarily just OCD or, you know, I just have to have it done. I actually feel just way more mentally clear when the space around me that I'm walking through is also kind of clear. And if it's not, then I start to feel frustrated and have a little bit of anxiety about that and have a hard time sitting down and focusing on like 4 hours of editing something if I know the dishes are like overflowing out of the sink. But if they're not and that's all done, I can sit and just kind of not think about that stuff. So I think it's also good to explain to your partner maybe why it is that you like the house clean, and because you'd have to then ask yourself, why is it that I like it clean? And if the only answer you can come up with is, well, grandma and mom did it and they made me do it and I don't really care one way or the other, I just do it, you know, then maybe you could ease up a little bit. But if it's like a feng shui thing that you can relate to the other person, you know, I think to me it's an energy flow. And when the house is cleaner and there's not a lot of clutter, I really feel better. And it just helps me get things done. It helps me be happier to you. They might understand that more than just always watching you like they're always cleaning. They're so obsessed with cleaning. So maybe if you could explain it a little bit more, but then still like not expecting that they're going to come and just be on your level because you're a certain way. You know, if they're a little messy, then you got to start to adjust to that, you know, and or decide, make an exit plan, I guess, at some point.
Nope out of it.
I'm reminded of an episode of Friends. Are you familiar? Is anyone familiar with the show? It's not the greatest. It's not the greatest ever, but there is an episode where Monica and Chandler are newly married, and Chandler decides to clean the apartment for Monica. And if you don't know anything about the show, Monica is OCD to the max. Everything has to be exactly in place. And she comes home. Her brother and her husband have gone through photo albums to try and replace everything exactly where it was so that she won't freak out. Because, of course, Chandler doesn't think about this until he's already cleaned half the apartment. And she walks in the door and her eyes get really big and she looks around and she's like, everything's different. Everything. And Chandler is terrified. He's like, I'm so sorry. Please don't divorce me. Please don't kill me. And she's like, it's okay. Why are you afraid of me? And, you know, he was like, I just think I'm going to disappoint you and you're going to be really mad and bad things are going to happen. And she's like, you know, it's actually okay because now I can spend the next 24 hours putting it all back together. You gave me the best thing ever. And I was like, that is so not where I thought it was going to go. But that's what it reminds me of, like, accepting that if you like the house super clean and your spouse tries to do something nice for you, sometimes you just got to take it as, you know what, they tried to do something nice for me.
They should take that 5 love languages test so they know what to do.
This is true. But I think there's a give and take.
What if I'm in a situation where my partner's one of their languages, that the main one is they say is acts of service, and therefore what happens, is that the level goes up. Oh, you did this for me today. Okay, I'll give you what you want, and a hug. Well, it kind of like the more I had to do, it became like a token thing. I noticed. And
sounds like a power struggle.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like a common relationship. Sounds like a power struggle, like you were adversaries.
I mean, if you view it as currency, we can kind of go with that, like tokens. But usually people save up tokens or save up money to spend it. You don't see many people with the idea of, I'm just going to save this money forever and never intend to use it. Even if you're saving it for a life savings, you're saving it for a reason. And if you're just hoarding it, you're not, that's not what a relationship is. You have to kind of just spend it back and forth of, oh, I got this, now you get this, and back and forth, not, I did all of this, so now I can cash in 10 years from now for something really good.
No, it wasn't like that. It was more, I had to do more to get less, and the less would get less. So I'd have to do more. It'd go from organizing clothes and stuff like that to doing housework to foot massages after work to still I would get nothing.
But as soon as I get nothing, I cut off services.
Yeah.
You can't be continuing to serve people that are not reciprocating. Like if it was a client and you were writing for them and they weren't paying you, and the next month they asked for more work but they weren't paying you, you wouldn't do that work, right?
It's the same thing
Very rarely.
I was going to say it's same thing with communication. If it's only one way, one person's going to get tired really quickly. You have to both be willing to communicate, and you have to both be willing to my brain is so bad today.
Stop dissing your brain, Jesus.
Okay, my brain is very tired and needs a break.
It's a lovely brain here.
It is a lovely brain.
Thank you.
And you've added so much.
Well, what it sounds like to me, Deirdre, is that the relationship you're describing is more like a feudal relationship where you owe the other person and you have to pay dividends on everything that you do, but they don't owe you anything back.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. It felt like I was taking up their air.
Take up your space. This is very important to take up your whole space, especially for women, because women a lot of the time try to shrink and make themselves invisible because of whatever adverse childhood experiences. And in reality, if you take up more space, if you're actually comfortable with the space that you're taking, people will respect you more.
It's like physically setting a boundary. Like, no one comes in this circle. If you are in this circle, you are a very close friend. It like makes it VIP status. And people tend to, if there's like, imagine if you're in a restaurant and there's this room that's empty, no one's in it, there's no sign, there's no door, nothing. And someone says, "Oh, sorry, you can't go in there." You're going to be like, "Why? What's so special about this one room?" But if it's got a VIP sign, it says, "You know what? This is Cindy Lou Who's birthday and only VIP status." You're going to be like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." All right.
I've
That's
seen,
a place
I've
that
seen this. I've seen this happen where let's say for example me, it didn't happen with me. I put up a boundary, and then this other person kind of went, right, there's a boundary, I'm gonna break it.
Yeah, that's not a friend.
That happens.
But
It's
what
not a
happens if
friend.
they're an in-law?
That's not a friend.
Yeah, but what happens if they're an in-law? They're family.
That's a really difficult situation. And are you talking like setting a bound physically, or like they're just intellectually pushing a boundary?
Oh, like, oh, I can't do this right now. I'm feeling really tired. I need some time to rest, and then I'll
Okay.
get back to you. So then they would feel it necessary that, well, I need to learn that
Yeah.
even if I'm tired, I still need to perform.
So
And
I take
kind
this.
of- and it'll be like a whole lesson plan
Yeah.
about like waking up at certain hours so that
That's a
they
power
learn.
play. That's I get to teach this person a lesson. And we all need to be careful about that, because I unfortunately did the same thing with my little sister, and now I'm actually regretting it because she's kind of learned the same trick and she's using it on me on Facebook. So, you reap what you sow. I take this back to physical. Let's imagine this is a physical situation. You put your hands up. You say, "Hey, this is my boundary. Don't get into my boundary. I'm not willing to let you pass here." And they keep pushing. What are you going to do? Are you going to drop your hands? Are you going to say, I didn't mean that. Actually, this is my boundary. You're good where you are. It's fine. Keep coming. No, you're going to be like, "No, I am not going to let you, or I'm going to try to push you out of my boundary."
See,
It's the
now
same
that
thing-
I am an old jerk, I would actually say, are you purposely crossing my boundary? Like,
Yeah.
like, do you actually mean to invade my personal space and step over the line that I'm putting out for you to not step over? Is that on purpose, or are you doing it by accident because you don't know what you're
Yeah.
doing?
But
Because
in
then they
their
have to
mind,
pay.
they've told themselves they're doing me a favor, even though I never asked.
And you
Okay.
can't change their mind on that. They're going to continue. They're going to think that, and they're going to think badly of you when you continuously say, "No, I need to go lay down. I need to rest." But the benefit is just like if that was your child and they were saying they need to go lay down and rest, and maybe they're sick and someone's trying to make them do something like that, and if it's not necessary, they're going to feel satisfied and you're going to feel satisfied. You're going to be like, "Hey, I just set that boundary." And they might be mad. They might not respect that boundary, or they might even think badly of me for doing that. But that's okay. I got what I needed, which was to set a boundary and know that I can set a boundary, especially with people you don't feel entitled to. And that includes family.
What I think so oftentimes is a good idea is to look back into nature. If you look out in nature and you see what happens if natural boundaries are being pushed or are being trespassed or are being ignored, then it's very obvious what will happen then. And the only way this these natural reactions for transgressions of boundaries will not happen is if something else has happened before, which is conditioning or social conditioning, and which unless some kind of conditioning or some kind of conditioning has happened before, though naturally we would push back, as you said, because it's a natural reaction and it's our birthright as well to do so. And the example, Agnieszka, you were bringing before, which is like if you're writing for somebody and you're not getting paid for the first month, and then he's asking for more, how would I ever write more? Well, what if somebody would make you believe that what you wrote was all bad or was all wrong or didn't work out and wasn't worth it, and you're not really that good and you're not really worth that money?
Somebody just tried that last or December. I had that experience. And I actually almost believed him. Like, despite being a writer for so many years, as soon as the guy said it, I was like, oh, maybe I'm really not that good.
So if people get into your head, and if people, are able to manipulate you, or to take away from your sense of self-worth, and are kind of have the ability to cutting you off the essence of who you truly are, making you believe things, that are not true, that are away from the truth, then yeah, so it definitely can happen. I think it happens every day. The examples that you guys brought forward just show this perfectly. And yeah, I think it's just another call, it just points out how important it is what we're discussing today, because even to tie in back the fallacies, those are all tools that can help us to identify where our boundaries are, and when they're being transgressed, and how to set our boundaries, and determine for ourselves, like, what are the action steps that we're taking, whether it's like on a physical level, on an emotional level, or even like on a rhetorical level. What are the certain steps that are being taken? If you talk about like physical self-defense or so, then like you would want to at least think about the steps that you take under certain conditions, or let's say like an earthquake is coming, whatever. Oh, you have your back, you have this, you have that. If A happens, you do B, and if C happens, you do D, and then at least you would have thought about it. So your reaction would not be just thought about in the very moment it happens, but you would have thought about it, and ideally you would have trained for that. And ideally the training would have been so good that it's in line with your nature and with your intuition, which is what you naturally would do anyway. Then the reaction is going to be fast and natural.
Yeah. So we have some comments from our listeners here. Dolce Williams is saying hello to Dennis. So that must be one of your friends.
Oh, sweet. Yes. Hey, Negasa, wagwan. How you do?
I'm not sure if that person is still here. And then also Cassandra is asking, what about doing things for love and not holding any expectations over anybody's head? Acts of service for love of yourself and your spouse, not waiting to receive something in return. So that's true, and that is absolutely possible. But it would not cause a power struggle. Like, if acts of service, there's no reason to that wouldn't cause a power struggle. Like, even though Eric didn't want gifts, but he wanted words of praise, when I gave him gifts, it still made him moderately happy. It just wasn't what he was looking for necessarily, right? Anybody? Did I just kill the conversation?
No, I had a lot of background noise.
I was looking.
I was just thinking, it's not like, for me, my situation, it's not like I was doing something to get that in return. It was more like the more I did, the less I got. It wasn't like I was looking.
Why did you allow it?
Being in a relationship with children, it's hard to kind of talk about stuff. Okay, let's have a conversation. It's usually the crack of dawn or really late at night, and that's if I can manage in between not feeling exhausted to want to put that much effort into a conversation. Okay, the dishes are really running me down. Can you help with something? It never happened. It was kind of like we'd get gaslighted for approaching even that conversation, and I was already run down and tired, so it just never happened. So it's not like I was putting up with it. It's just like, how do you get past that situation?
Yeah, it's hard. And in some situations, you literally need to create a physical separation. When you're in a relationship, earlier I was thinking, what about children? And it's terrifying to think of these kind of psychopathic parents using all this manipulation on children who really don't have a chance, so they can't just leave. They can't identify what's even happening, right? Like Willa was saying earlier, that she years later said, well, maybe that's what that was. But as a kid, you're not going, oh, my dad's gaslighting me right now, that's why I feel this way, right? Like, you're like a dog on a leash in some ways. Like, children are the most vulnerable people on the planet. And so it just got me thinking, like, how terrifying that is. Because I can say, oh, you should just leave. What do you mean? You need to get away from that person. I've done that with problems I've had with people at work. It doesn't happen often. But I came across someone who was actually enjoying my reactions to the issues that would come up. So if he would bring something up and I would kind of point out a fallacy that he was using or something, or get a little bit emotional about something, he was actually feeding on that. Luckily, I caught that really early on, that this guy was like totally psycho, right? And he actually would like physically kind of threaten me at some points. And that's when I said, that's it, dude. Like, this is a work environment. Like, this is not the bar. And I literally moved my desk. I was like, I'm creating the physical separation here because my boss wouldn't fire the guy. I did go to my boss and I said, look, this dude just physically threatened me and we're in a work environment. Like, it's totally inappropriate. But this guy was so cunning. He was kissing my boss's ass so hard that the boss couldn't see it because he knew, hey, I'm going to make best friends with that boss. I'm going to say everything right to that boss. But these guys around me, he was playing this like power struggle. He was always talking about how he was going to buy a Lamborghini, and all the stories of his were so badass, you know, just like one of these people that really don't want to be around. And that's unfortunate in a work environment. Sometimes you really can't get out of that, or you don't have the tools to know what's going on or how to deal with it. But in a family situation, like what Deirdre's saying, that might be a couple of years in the making. Like, hey, I realized the situation's not working. And sometimes you can't just cut the cord right there. But you do need to kind of realize sometimes that the relationship may not work. I'm not saying that's like one of the first cards you play. But yeah, that might be an end result, right? The person's not going to get better. They're not going to start giving a little bit more, you know?
Yeah. So it's not like I wanted to stay. It was more like it was like it has to be very progressive, and there's still going to involve. And
but if there is a power struggle, you can always like find something that person wants from you, not necessarily involving children, but something that they want from you, and use that.
In my experience, that they lie. They just blatantly lie. They'll be like, I don't care about that, and then they won't.
Well, so when my mom was a little bit more hormonal, and before she got a hold of her thyroid thing, whenever she was getting really like irate, I would just say, "Oh, I gotta go. Sorry, I'll talk to you later." And I found a way to not talk to her every time she was irate. And now she's irate, I lost a lot less around me, and she keeps that to herself more instead of like phoning me and like yelling at me whenever she's got some kind of a hormonal imbalance going on, because I don't participate. But I just don't participate.
Not everyone handles it. Like, I guess what I'm saying is, whenever you set boundaries, you kind of put yourself at risk for a backlash. And I was looking for a quote that I thought I downloaded the other day, and it said something along the lines of, if you set boundaries and they get mad, that does not mean that you are wrong for setting boundaries. And that was something that I had to get over. It was really stuck in my mind. I don't want to be like, oh, you were lucky, or, oh, your situation was any, less or more. But there is a difference between people who are like, oh, I can't get what I want right there. I'm not going to continue on that avenue because that seems rational. That's what normal people do. An actual narcissist or a psychopathic parent, they need that attention. If you try to set a boundary and you say, I don't want to be around you, all of a sudden, when you're brushing your teeth, all of a sudden they need to use the restroom. What are you going to do? Tell them they have to hold it? Or they need the pan that you're cooking in and they're 10 minutes late to work. Are you really going to be the asshole that doesn't let them eat? They will find ways to maneuver themselves. Find ways that you can't defend.
Something. And it would have, I don't know, your favorite shirt. Next minute it's got this strategic hole or tear in it or something. They're quite really sick people.
But then also,
sorry,
I see that and I feel, maybe from a different perspective, I like to look at things that, what does this situation force you to do? What does it invite you to do? What kind of perspective, what kind of view on things, on yourself, on the whole situation are you being, invited to take, how can you, what does the situation prevent you from doing, from thinking, from feeling? What does it, urge you to do, whether it's like, action steps, or whether it's like, certain mindsets to take on, or different perspectives to take on. Because I would still try to see it, as bad as it is, as an opportunity for growth. And maybe the growth is a new perspective that brings you closer together, or maybe that growth will lead you on your personal growth, which actually is growing out and growing away from that particular flower spot that you're in, if excuse the
Meadow.
the comparison. Yeah, but it's to see it as life already put you in that situation. So what to do with it? Like, are you gonna sit in it, marinate in it, and kind of like, soak in it and tell everybody, oh, it's bad, it's impossible to get out? Instead, or like, okay, well, that's interesting, that's kind of, like a sick perspective, or this guy is kind of really acting weird, and okay, what does this force me to do? What can I do? What is within my ability? Okay, I can move my desk, or okay, well, I can.
I like what you're saying, Dennis. For me, it was, I just stopped complaining. I had to stop complaining. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. But I did. The complaining did nothing. It was just complaining.
Yeah.
It was, for me, it was, I had to start.
But you had to realize that you're worth more.
I didn't
right?
feel crazy.
Sorry.
If you take the perspective of it down from like the earthly perspective of this person is an asshole to me, to the God perspective above, what is your higher self trying to tell you by presenting you with all these people who are challenging your boundaries? And what is the challenge here, and what's the path out of that? Because, you have all the answers within you, so why are you doing that to yourself?
That's another quote that I just read. I love quotes. They say things so much better than I can. But it said, Agnieszka, what were you just saying?
God perspective.
Boundaries. Okay.
Boundaries.
In this lifetime you need to learn love, you will be surrounded by people who don't provide it. If you need to set boundaries, you will be surrounded by people who constantly push your boundaries. Like, you're always surrounding yourself with people, and your struggles are always signs of what you're lacking in, what you need to work on, or even just not like what you feel.
What direction you're growing towards.
Yeah, especially if there's like a pattern and a history, like why do I keep meeting these horrible people? That's a big sign that maybe, there's something that's going on with you. I constantly see people falling out of relationships and immediately jumping into another, and not taking any time to kind of analyze what happened in that last relationship, and then going, well, why can't I meet the right person? It's just not working, and it's like, okay, it's so obvious from the outside, but I guess sometimes it's hard to see things from your own perspective.
Because they didn't learn the lesson, right? They didn't learn the lesson, so they have to keep on repeating the lesson until they get it.
Yeah. This wasn't in The Body Keeps the Score. It refers to it, but I'll have to remember where I found it. It was talking about children who are physically abused. One of the first centers that goes off in their brain is pattern recognition, especially in women or young, little girls. So to me, how it made sense was, if this is a biological process that keeps you alive, recognizing a pattern when you are stuck inside an abusive situation isn't helpful. You can't do anything about it. You can't get out. You're just going to send your body into panic mode, and you're going to basically just drain yourself. So you end up going into like this spaced out posturing kind of deal, and you literally cannot recognize patterns. That part of your brain kind of just goes offline. It's like, nope, sorry. Most young girls who have been physically and sexually abused they all test extremely low in their pattern recognition on all of their standardized tests.
And you're talking about behavioral patterns or visual patterns?
Behavioral patterns, numerical patterns, sometimes like musical, anything that has to do with like a pattern recognition that isn't like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you know, something that is memorized. Recognizing those patterns, I never realized how bad I was at it until I started taking those stupid standardized tests, and I realized it would be like it'd have a list of numbers, and like they'd be like, tell me the pattern in between this. And after the second one, I never got any of them right. I couldn't see the pattern. And it wasn't until I saw in geometry and actually could visualize the pattern that anything made sense.
Nice. Well, we're going to have to continue with this discussion on Monday, where we talk about planning. Monday is all about planning. We're returning to Tim Flynn's course. Does anybody else have any closing arguments?
Just the Tim Flynn's Foundations of Self-Discovery. It sounds like it's going right along kind of with the tail end of this conversation. What is that about?
So every week basically mid-January we changed the format of Raising Excellence, and now every week we address a different exercise or learning experience. We do the exercise in the beginning of the week, and then we discuss it on Wednesday and Thursday. And so for the last several weeks, we've been going through Tim Flynn's course with step-by-step, going with each module of his course. And we're on module 7, I think. But I'm sure that we'll be making changes now that we've tried it out. We might be making changes to that course. But it is something that you can follow by listening to Raising Excellence and following with the exercises that we present every week.
Oh, that's a really good idea. That's cool. I like that. Mm-hmm. And now you can just start the show on Thursdays with the fallacy, and then the whole thing will just run. You don't have to do anything else.
Well, often we have a lot to say about the conclusion for the week, and the fallacy doesn't always fill so nicely into our discussion as it did this week. So, but yeah, maybe Thursdays will be about starting with the fallacy. Who knows? Thank you very much for hosting for us, Tyler. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic.
No problem. Yeah. It's great to meet you, Dennis. I've not met you before, so here we're virtually meeting, and it was great to meet you, Willow.
Too bad he hasn't fixed the slide yet.
Looking forward to talking more to you soon.
Perfect. Yeah, you too, man. And Deirdre, always a great joy talking with you. And Agnieszka, thank you for doing the technical side of things and dealing with that extra pressure. Everybody can catch the Raising Excellence back on Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, on all the different social networks. I'm not going to give them a voice here because we don't want to give them any advertising. But yeah, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. Or wait, sorry, I screwed up. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern.
Perfect. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.